Hi there, welcome once again. I'm Imran Garda, and you're in the stream. What you've just heard, what you've been listening to, is a remix of our theme tune sent to us by a viewer, DJ Yamin from New Orleans. Now, we've received many submissions after we asked you to send us your versions of the stream's title track using SoundCloud. And over the next few days, we'll be playing some more of them. So keep sending them to us. Let's move on to the show now. Today, a tale of two Chinas. As its economy continues to grow, why are we seeing increasing tensions between the rich and the poor? As always, our digital producer Ahmed Shihabuddin is here looking out for all your feedback. Ahmed, lots of feedback from Egypt, from Occupy Wall Street and many more places.
It's true.
Yeah, look forward to it. Also on the couch is Ting Shu, a researcher and analyst with the Bertelsmann Foundation, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank. Ting writes regularly on Chinese affairs, and a most recent article is called Destination Unknown, Investment in China's Go Out Policy. Interesting word, unknown. There seems to be a lot of things unknown when you look at China and, if we can call it, the West.
Yes, exactly, you're right. What my recent piece is about is to look at the growing wealth that China has compiled in recent years, the 3 trillion Chinese the foreign reserves, and where is that heading to? Traditionally has been going to a lot of developing countries, but it seems now that it's heading to developed countries. So I looked into how that kind of trend is having an impact on in the US and in Europe.
As an expert on China, particularly in the West, have you found more and more interest in you and in your expertise in the past few years?
Certainly. In the US, a lot of people now have becoming more and more interested in China affairs, because I think in some ways people have realized any kind of international subject, if you don't bring China into the discussion, there is a significant lack of perspective in the kind of result of the dialogue. So it's becoming a necessity.
Okay, Ting, we look forward to your views as we take a peek inside China and we ask whether there is a class war or not and how this is developing. Good to have you on the Orange Couch. Now, let us know what stories matter to you. Follow us on Twitter, send us a tweet with the hashtag AJStream. Now, we could feature your suggestion in a future episode.
Well, here's one story that matters to you. On Friday in Cairo and New York City, protesters are planning to take to the streets to send their governments a message. In Cairo, 60 political parties and groups have threatened to boycott elections set for November unless the country's military amends election laws. Now, Adam Makeri, our producer in Egypt, right here tweeted, over 20 political groups expected to join Friday's protests to, quote, reclaim the revolution. Now, unlike previous protests, there's a real consensus among all of the various political groups. They're really calling this time for an end to the emergency law. Now, we have another tweet from Zenobia. She says, 39, which is Friday, in Tahrir, our force is in our unity, referring to the fact that, again, they have kind of one goal in mind. But perhaps this photo circulating on Twitter, right here, posted by Mahmoud Mustafa, really is summing up the Egyptian people's frustration with the military's slow pace of reforms. You can see, I'm going to zoom in a bit for you. There's 3 snails with the Egyptian flags, and it says, Egypt on the road to democracy. So you can always count on the Egyptians to add some humor to the dialogue. And in New York City, demonstrators have spent nearly 2 weeks peacefully protesting against corporate influence and greed on Wall Street. Now, they're upset with a range of government actions, including bank bailouts and the mortgage crisis. Demonstrators finally seem to have rallied new support now. We see in this tweet, J.P. Barlow, who is a legendary musician and internet activist who coined the term cyberspace and also appeared on our show, announced he'll join the movement. He writes, I'll come down to Occupy Wall Street late tomorrow afternoon, better late than never. And we also have this video right here, which is one of many that has emerged showing online, or rather it emerged online, showing police using force against demonstrators. Now I'm going to play it for you, just the first 8 seconds right here. You'll see, there's the police officer in the white, and you'll see right there, he throws a punch at one of the protesters. Now it's videos like these that have spurred activists to call for larger protests expected on Friday. Now, we'll be following all these stories over the next few days. If you have any updates, share them with us using the hashtag AJStream. And here is a little taste of some of the other hashtags we're looking at.
Now they say hard work, persistence, and a little bit of luck will get you the American dream. And many are indeed living that dream in China. In a little over 30 years, China's economy has grown tenfold to become the world's second largest. This has spawned a legion of multimillionaires and even billionaires. But the wealthy are accused of often breaking laws and manipulating government officials and police. Look at that picture on my screen. It's a woman at the center of the latest controversy. She's 20-year-old Guo Mei, and she published pictures of her possessions, luxury cars, a huge house, designer handbags on China's micro-blogging site Sina Weibo. Here's another one of her posing next to a Maserati. So, oh, sorry about that. So there you have it. There she is posing next to a Maserati. All of this on Sina Weibo, and social media is abuzz with how all of that may have come from possible corruption in the Red Cross Society, because in some posts she claimed she worked for them. So the Red Cross Society of China, where she possibly worked, but that's not confirmed. Now netizens say she has so far evaded all questions about how she actually got that, sudden wealth. And let me show you a video as well, which was filmed on a bystander's cell phone. We're not entirely sure in what part of China this was from, but it's a very revealing and quite shocking video. We're not entirely sure. We can't independently verify exactly when it happened, but there's somebody lying on the street who was obviously knocked over, and it seems as if this lady at the center, the lady complaining in the middle, in the blue skirt pointing, she's knocked somebody over, but she's blaming them for being in the way. There's a crowd of bystanders there arguing with her. I mean, arguably in some other countries this sort of situation could lead to lynching, could lead to some sort of mob anger, but this wasn't the case. There's an argument going on there, and all the while somebody's been knocked over in the middle of the road. So that video that you can find on social media over there. Let's discuss this. Let's find out if there is actually a class war. Joining us now on Skype, Chinese journalist Jin Zhao. She also writes the blog Things You Don't Know About China, focusing on Chinese society, online discourse, and Chinese culture. Also with us is Malcolm Riddell, who authors the blog China Debate. He's an investment consultant for businesses in China. Welcome to the stream, both of you. If I could start off with you, Jin, are there two Chinas, or maybe even more than two Chinas?
Well, I would say yes. First of all, there's a very huge disparity between the rural areas and the urban areas, and and within the cities, there are different groups of people who have different economic and social status, and I would agree that there are different Chinas. I don't know how many, but there is no just one uniform China.
Well, Jin, we're seeing more and more instances of these videos going viral on Sina Weibo and on other platforms, even anecdotes that make it into written form on the internet of this idea of these spoilt rich brats flaunting their wealth, the possible political power they may have because of their father's business interests or their own wealth, and a perceived lack of responsibility and lack of accountability for their actions. How much does that suggest about these two Chinas or more Chinas and the economic disparities?
I think, like everyday Chinese people are very upset about these incidences, and that's why, they always will stir up huge, angry discussions online, on social media. But then at the same time, I think a lot of Chinese, especially young people in the city, city dwellers, and middle class Chinese are actually, I mean, I guess they aspire to become one of the members of that class. So it's very strange. I think people are very, very upset about these things.
Malcolm, would you agree with Jin that this is representative of a deeper issue at play?
Yes, I think so, and I particularly agree with Jen in one way. I think the wealth and income inequality gap, as she suggests, really isn't the issue. It's the problem is that there's a double standard for the rich and for the rest, and there's a perception that the rich didn't get rich fairly. I think any ambitious young Chinese man or woman says, just as Jen said, hey, that could be me someday. So they don't mind that there's millionaires and billionaires. But what they want is that they want to have one standard for everybody. And the second thing is that they want to have a level playing field. They don't want to feel that they have to have family connections and bribe officials to get ahead.
Ting, undeserved wealth, is that at the nexus of this?
I mean, certainly that's one part of the theme that is generating all these anger in China. But I would add also the kind of anger that you are seeing on, for example, social media. That is a certain group of people who have the means to get on social media. But a very vast majority of poverty in China are concentrated in rural areas and in the migrants who are in a city who doesn't have any kind of means to give themselves basic social safety net. So for them, it's not even a level of playing field. They just need to have some way to survive, to have a basic, living standard.
Yeah, interesting. I'm looking at some statistics here. I mean, in Lufeng in Guangdong province, over 1,000 farmers protested recently, led to some riots, what they called a blatant land grab. And it's estimated that 180,000 large-scale protests in China took place last year, 65% of them in the countryside. Thoroughly revealing. Ahmed, we're getting some feedback?
Yeah, you mentioned farmers protesting, and we have one tweet from This Is Humanity on Twitter, or Ben Major, saying mass starvation could incite unrest in China, because we put out that question, but he says, but China is huge with many very different people, the kind of point you were referring to, certain people are connected and not. And then he says 80% of the country has little transportation or communication infrastructure. And I'm not going to read this other tweet, but it's a point at the end of this tweet. He says the majority of people in China don't care about these things because they've been through harder times. So comparatively, it's perhaps not a problem. What do you think about that? I see you wincing.
Jin?
There, Jin.
Well, I don't think people don't care about these things, especially I think those riots, as far as I know, a lot of them have to do with land. Some local government will take the land from farmers while don't give them enough or satisfactory compensation, and then sell this land to developers because that's how they get revenue for the local government. And a lot of these riots are because of this sort of unfairness. So, and also these on social media, I noticed that people are tweeting about these incidences, and people are angry about them.
Malcolm, at the core of a core theme of the Chinese government, historically, and definitely over the past 30 years or so, has been social harmony, emphasis on that word harmony, looking at both the rural-urban divide and this kind of anger towards the rich that we're seeing playing out on social media. How much does that disturb the perception that the government's trying to create that things are quite harmonious in China?
Well, certainly it belies that perception. but I think we have an inherent contradiction. You know that at the beginning of the reform movement in the late 70s, Deng Xiaoping supposedly said to get rich is glorious, and that he wanted the people in the urban coastal areas to get rich first and bring everybody up. So the same way, so you have an inherent contradiction here between sort of a social harmony and a level playing field, and policies that have favored at different times have favored various groups over others. And so I think what you what you end up with though is a situation where in the rural areas, of course, we see these riots taking place. But now, what I'm finding interesting is we're beginning to see it in the urban areas, and we're seeing it over. For example, one that I saw was when local police kicked a crippled fruit vendor to death. Yeah. There was a huge protest, a spontaneous protest there, violent protests that had to be put down. And then we're beginning to see protests by the middle class, such as it is in cities, say against polluters who are polluting in their neighborhoods. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we're seeing a very widespread sense of that social harmony is coming unraveled at many different levels and for many different reasons. Initially, it was, I think, a lot of it was the land and corruption and the fact that local officials are at least portrayed as very often being corrupt and capricious. Okay. But now we're seeing much more widespread discontent.
Ting, the government is definitely bearing this in mind. They can definitely see the possible pitfalls of not doing anything. Wen Jiabao has said, Premier Wen has said that they need to bridge this urban-rural divide. He spoke about not only making the pie of social equality bigger, but distributing it better. Arguably, the Arab Spring started off with a street vendor, yep. Showing his anger at his lack of economic opportunities. Do they see the warning signs?
You're absolutely right. I think the Chinese government absolutely have seen that this is a very potentially dangerous phenomenon, and they have been putting a lot of emphasis in trying to solve the problem. A recently published China human rights report have listed rural poverty as one of the top challenge for the government. I want to go back to the earlier point a little bit on the social media and people's anger by creating instability. I think it's actually a double-edged sword. So, for example, you have the social media bringing people and aggregating their opinions, and so they can probably protest together. But on the other side, it gives government the signal what people are angry about. And if we give the example of what happened in Dalian, over 10,000 people were protesting against the local polluter, a chemical factory, and the government ended up taking it off. So I think one could see that this as sort of a double-edged sword, and depends on how the government deal with it.
Interesting description of the double-edged sword. Ahmed, dip into the tweets that we're getting.
Yeah, a lot of people are referring to capitalism and this market-driven approach. Habtoum saying, could we be saying capitalism is spreading in China in a way? So perhaps a bit obvious there. But then also Aim High 2400 saying, what is the reason of wealth disparity? It's neoliberalism. Did China accept it? No. Did the U.S. accept it? Yes. So what do you think he means there, Jen?
Well, I think China is really, embracing that sort of, a free market capitalist economy. And as far as I know, the majority of Chinese city dwellers are also embracing that idea, neoliberalism, and the ideas of democracy and equality, and at the same time they want to get rich. In fact, I think it was a Pew research last year shows that 9 out of 10 Chinese people in cities are actually happy about what China's state right now, because these people have opportunities to become rich. But I do agree with Imran. I think, Malcolm. what people are not happy about is the privilege of some people have, and the inequality that people feel like some issues they feel powerless.
Okay, I want to bring Malcolm in here because I want to throw another layer of complexity to this. You have economic disparity, and you have people feeling that many of the rich didn't get rich fairly, a growing economy, but you've also got issues of political and perhaps ethnic identity and fault lines emerging over that. For example, Tibet, for example, the Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, perhaps issues of ethnic identity in the Manchuria region as well. When you add those to the mix, how complex does this become, and does it become a situation where somewhere down the line it will be difficult to hold all of this together?
Well, I'm afraid I'm not in the camp of the when China rules the world. And we could have a very long show just about all the systemic problems that could bring China into a lot of difficulty. I don't think it's going to collapse, but I think there's plenty that could hold it back. And I think you've hit on one of the key ones. But the thing is that the Chinese, unlike the Russians, the Russians when they broke into their own country, had both economic and political liberalization at the same time. It was pretty much a disaster. In China, we've had economic liberalization and reform, but we've still had very strong security and crackdowns on areas like Tibet and the Uyghurs, and a lot of these protests. So that at the moment, the Chinese model is to suppress all dissent, and so these fault lines that you're mentioning are there, but whether or not they'll turn into an earthquake is a tougher matter.
Ting, you want to come in there?
Yeah, I actually disagree a little bit with the earlier comment. I think if one asked me if China is capitalist, I would say actually it could be more, because if you are really a capitalistic society, the market should be completely open, the resources should be sort of distributed at the beginning in a more fair ways. What we have seen in China right now is that the income disparity is caused by the monopolized industries that small groups of people that hold the large amount of resources, and by investing these resources they get richer, but those people who does not have the resources to initiate with, the way you can accumulate wealth in the future is becoming actually less.
Well, you're implying a socialism for the rich and capitalism imposed upon the poor in a way.
No, I just think it should be an even freer market.
Yeah.
If you need to have a little bit more of a redistribution of wealth to really create a free market.
I just want to put one question to Malcolm, because you spoke, Malcolm, actually let me put this question to you. We have Acor30 saying, I think China needs a Middle East style revolution to force democracy. Then we have Jay Besut one saying, China, now if that were to happen, it would be the mother of all popular uprisings. So whether it should or shouldn't happen, do you see it potentially happening? Could it happen soon?
Before I answer that, could I just do a quick follow up on
Sure, just on
the earlier thing?
Yeah.
I think the issue, I think the real core at the income distribution and wealth distribution problem, to a great extent, comes from not just from the way it's distributed by the government, but the fact that it's really state capitalism, and that the government has made a conscious choice to lavish resources on state-owned enterprises and wealthy individuals. For example, in the financial sector, the banks take money from the foreign exchange earnings and from household savings and channel these to these entities and people. And the way they do it is there's not many places to put your money, so people put their money, their savings into a bank. The bank puts
Malcolm,
a
I'm
low
going to jump in there just for a second. I'm going to allow you to both answer this and talk about the issue of popular uprisings in the post show, because we have run out of time on the TV show, unfortunately. We've got about 15 seconds left. So Jin, Malcolm, and Ting, thanks a lot for joining us on the stream. Ahmed, stay where you are. All of you stay where you are. We'll continue this discussion in the post show at stream.aljazeera.com. Here's another remix of our soundtrack from Ryan Mitchell. Welcome back to the post show. So much to say, so little time as always. That's why we have a post show, and that's why we're happy to have a post show. We hope you're watching on stream.aljazeera.com. Malcolm and Jin are back. Ting is also here on the orange couch. Malcolm, let's go back to you. You can finish your point on the pitfalls of the implementation of state capitalism and continue.
Okay, I will wrap it up quickly. But what's happening is that the wealth of the common person is being sort of systematically drained off to feed the state capitalism and the well-connected individuals. And now, if I can go to your next question about a popular uprising, I don't see that as a real possibility. It may happen, but I think popular uprising is a difficult thing in a country the size of China. If there were a problem where the elites were able to organize, and there was another Mao Zedong to go out into the countryside, there could be a problem. But I can't see that happening. I see a much greater threat, though, from on far left on the rise of Maoism. Many now are looking at the age of Mao in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as now a golden age where there wasn't income inequality, there wasn't corruption. Officials worked for the people and not to line their own pockets. And this has become an increasingly popular faction. What's happened with this is that I don't think it's going to take over. I think it's going to be more like the Tea Party in the U.S. and a strong gravitational force.
Okay.
But if this happens, we'll see very different policies and ones that could begin to address these issues without an uprising.
Okay. Jin was on the move, but she looks settled now. I hope she can still hear me. Jin, can you hear?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. There we go. Okay, Jin, the point of
yes.
Mao Zedong and the fact that there does seem to be an inherent contradiction in the way China operates today, and when you look at the essence of Mao's teachings and the uprising was to empower the subsistence farmers in the neglected interior regions of China and take away that power from the coastal areas. Do you see an appetite amongst people to go back to this so-called golden era that Malcolm mentioned, that many people are nostalgic for?
Yes, I do not think it's going to be a substantial going back to the Mao era, because I think even if people have that kind of nostalgic feelings about that golden, times, I don't think it's, for most people, I don't think that's a really viable solution. Although it's interesting that I've noticed that there is a village in China that is actually collective. They have a collective economy, but they are very autonomous. They're just one village there. So that's kind of interesting. So, but then I still believe that most people, especially those in the cities, I would say, are not very. The Maoism is not that as appealing to them as liberalism.
Okay.
I think.
Ting, does Maoism still have a role beyond the slogans, if you like? I mean, he is revered, but actually going back to the ideological aspect of it.
To answer that question directly, I would say no. But there is a phenomenon that people are going back in a nostalgic way to those time period. I think it's a way to show people's discontent of the current situation, especially in corruption and in the disparity. But I don't think this is going to create a big movement based on those values, because we have seen in the old time in China, Maoism did not really create that much wealth. So if you go on the street and ask people who say they are very nostalgic of Chairman Mao, if you ask he or she, I would doubt that they want to go back to exactly that kind of income level that he or she used to be. Yeah, so I agree with Jing on that part, but I disagree with Malcolm a little bit in the way that there is no such danger of a social uprising in China, because what you see, like I said before, on the social media, it's these intellectuals and people with already a base means in their life to sort of create a platform for their discussion.
But I mean, he's saying you looked at the Tibetans rising up, and effectively they were quashed. You look at the Uyghurs in Xinjiang, and on numerous levels, China is winning this battle away from those Uyghurs who want self-determination.
Right, because these are separate incidents in different areas. I think we cannot sort of overlook the possibility that if these different dots are connected, there is certain kind of danger, especially if the intellectuals and the bottom level of the society is linked in some ways. And if the Chinese government think there's no such a danger, they wouldn't have put so much emphasis in solving this problem.
Just quickly, before I go to some tweets, I want to know, how difficult do you think it is to connect those dots for the masses, let's say, in China?
That's a very good question. I think at the current level, I don't see that there is such a connection yet. But I think
just because of the lack of communication, or because China's so big, as Malcolm was saying?
As we discussed before, the class sort of idea in the society is sort of coming back, and there is a different level of conditions that people have. So if you don't have a common line of communication, then it's harder. But the social media is actually making that part a little bit easier now.
All right, just quickly, since we're talking about social media, we have from South Korea, Live J saying, I think the Chinese issue is quite familiar for me because the whole unbalanced income problem is also a South Korean headache. Now, Malcolm, earlier you were talking about how Russia is quite different.
I can't hear you.
Sorry, Malcolm, can you hear me?
Sort of.
Okay,
Well,
I'll speak up. You spoke about how China and Russia were different. You were pointing out the differences. We have Ibrahim Daji saying, you look at what's happening in China and you think of the Russian Revolution, the rich were always at the top. So at least in that capacity, do you see his point?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear his point. You weren't clear. I beg your pardon.
Okay.
What was the point? I'll respond.
Can you hear me a bit
Yes, perfect.
more clearly? Oh, perhaps there's a problem with your microphone there. Ahmed Malcolm, there was the point being made by Ibrahim Daji, who tweeted in saying that although you said that China and Russia are quite different, he feels that when he looks at what's happening in China, he thinks of the Russian Revolution, where the rich were always at the top. Do you at least accept his comparison in that capacity?
No, because here we've got an institution of the Chinese Communist Party, which and backed by the military, that is still firmly in control. There happen to be wealthy elites and others in the private sector, but they're being drawn into the party now. So we have the seat of great power and the seat of the people of great wealth coming together. I think it's a much different situation there.
Jin, do you think Malcolm is right in qualifying the power structure in that way?
Well, I do think that Maoism. I just think that a lot of people actually still have the fresh memory of that era of the mistake of Cultural Revolution, and especially like my father's generation, they actually experienced that experience. So I don't think Maoism is that appealing to Chinese people now. Well, I'm sorry, I just can't hear very clearly.
Yeah, apologies for that. Apologies for that. We're going to try and get the connection a bit better.
I don't know if I answered your question.
Ting?
Yeah, I agree with what Malcolm's what he said, and I would go one step further in that I see that there is also a potential of the second generation rich, a kind of potential clash of the second generation rich and the second generation officials. That's how we hear people categorize that in China, because yes, the government is trying to draw the people with wealth into a certain group to help manage the country, but when you have certain privilege in the economy, you kind of sometimes could potentially run into a conflict. It's just like business to business conflict. You know, for example, in land development, if I can give I have the authority to give this land, and somebody I want to give the land to also is in clash with another businessman who wants the land, then I might have a tough decision to
Yes,
make.
one of the questions is, when you talk about the second generation rich, one of the questions is, if things are so rosy for the second generation rich in China, why do so many want to leave and come to places like the United States and elsewhere in the West?
Yeah, you're right, because over 60% of the, I think in the recent report, over 60% of the billionaires are thinking of migrating, especially to the US. I think that's several reasons. One is that obviously there's better environment, better, less pollution, and better education system for their children. I actually know a lot of rich Chinese people still ship milk powder, for example, from abroad nowadays. The other reason I think is also that there is lack of investment opportunity inside China. So by investing overseas, that creates a little bit more
Interesting
future
that you
opportunity.
mentioned the fresh air. I didn't know that could be an element. Ladies and gentlemen, it's been a great pleasure having you as part of this discussion. Apologies for the little technical gremlins towards the end, but Jin Zhao and Malcolm Riddell joining us via Skype. Thank you very much for joining us
Thank you for having
this
us.
discussion on the stream. Yes, it was multifaceted, and we're not going to get to cover all of it in 40 minutes, but it doesn't harm us to try, does it? Thanks a lot for joining us on this stream. And thank you very much, Ting.
Thank you.
Good to have you on the Orange Couch. We hope you join us again sometime in the
Yeah,
future.
we'd love to.
Ahmed, thanks for all the feedback.
Been
and
fun.
yeah, we hope we can sort out your mic for tomorrow, or rather for Monday then.
Yes.
Thanks for joining us on the stream. In about a couple of hours' time, this will be reposted, so you can watch it again on YouTube and on stream.aljazeera.com. Bye-bye for now.